There's a specific kind of person who remains steady even when everything around them is breaking apart. They don't raise their tone. They don't jump into arguments. They don't rush to defend their point or chase validation. They simply breathe and stay present. While others scramble to understand what's happening, they sit quietly, observing, as if the storm is something they've already survived before you've probably come across someone like this. Someone who carries a stillness that feels almost protective, as though silence itself is wrapped around them. No matter how chaotic life becomes, they remain centered, grounded, and almost untouchable. And if you've ever wondered how some people stay composed while others crumble, the truth behind it goes much deeper than you expect. Real calmness isn't the absence of emotion. It's emotion filtered through understanding. These people feel everything, but they don't respond the way they once did. After enough experiences, enough pain, enough moments where panic solved nothing, they stop trying to wrestle with things they can't control. Instead of fighting the weather, they learn to stand in the rain without losing themselves. That's the foundation of their calm. It's not something they were born with, it's something they earned. Many calm individuals were once the exact opposite. They used to overthink, worry endlessly, try to manage every situation and fix every problem. They wanted to keep everyone happy, to maintain control, to prevent anything from falling apart. And each attempt taught them the same lesson. Life refuses to bend just because you're afraid. At some point, they stop trying to force life into their expectations and learn to adapt instead. Calmness isn't apathy. It's emotional maturity. Psychologists describe this as emotional regulation. But the term doesn't fully capture what it feels like. It's not about shutting down feelings or pretending everything is fine. It's about understanding your emotions so clearly that they no longer dictate your behavior. Calm people aren't numb. They're fluent in their inner world. They can feel anger without exploding, sadness without sinking, and fear without losing direction. Deep inside, there's a voice that whispers, "This moment won't last forever." And that voice isn't naive. It's based on memory they've lived through enough to know that pain fades, panic makes nothing better, and peace comes from acceptance rather than control. People often misinterpret calmness as coldness, but in reality, it usually comes from compassion. These are the people who hold steady when everyone else is trembling. They can offer reassurance when tension rises because they understand that chaos is temporary. This quiet strength is powerful. It's the strength of understanding which battles matter and which ones do nothing but drain your energy. It's the strength of choosing peace even when your instincts push you toward conflict. But let's explore why only some people reach this state. The answer lies partly in the brain. The amygdala, the region responsible for fear and emotional intensity, becomes more balanced in people who practice calmness, whether through mindfulness, life experience, or simply surviving emotional storms. It continues to signal danger, but it no longer takes full control. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, learns to intervene before emotions explode. In simple terms, calm people develop a mental buffer between feeling and reacting. And that pause, however small, changes everything. That pause lets them hear harsh words without firing back. It lets them sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. It allows them to think clearly, even when situations get messy. That small moment of stillness becomes the space where clarity and wisdom live. What's interesting is that most calm people didn't learn this skill from books or therapy. They learned it through heartbreak, conflict, disappointment, and years of reacting in ways they later regretted. Eventually, the exhaustion from chaos becomes heavier than the effort required to stay calm. They grow tired of apologizing, explaining themselves, and dealing with consequences that came from rushed reactions, so they choose something different. They choose peace, not because they're weak, but because they finally understand how expensive chaos is. Still, their calmness isn't effortless. Calm people often have storms inside them that they keep private. They've been hurt, ignored, misunderstood, and doubted. Their calm is crafted through hardship, not through ease. It's the type of peace formed when someone decides that emotional turbulence no longer deserves control over their life. This shift changes everything about how they think. They stop reacting to impulses and start responding with intention. They don't chase approval because peace matters more than validation. They don't argue endlessly because they've learned that being right is not worth losing their center. They view life differently, moving with perspective rather than urgency. Psychology calls this response flexibility, the ability to choose your response instead of letting instinct choose for you. Calm people don't bury their feelings. They channel them. They let emotions move through without letting them consume everything. They may appear composed in difficult moments, but they often release those feelings privately later. That's not hypocrisy, it's timing. They know when to feel, when to act, and when to let go. To understand calm people, you need to understand how they see the world. They don't just react differently, they interpret differently. Where others see chaos, they look for meaning. Where others see crisis, they see opportunities for growth. Where others see loss, they see redirection. Their perception has widened. They see the bigger picture instead of drowning in the immediate moment. That's why they can accept outcomes that would devastate others and say, maybe this needed to happen. It's not denial, it's depth. The person who seems unaffected has probably lived through pain so intense that they no longer fear small storms. They've learned not to live inside the wounds of their past. They've discovered that letting go of control creates room for peace. So when you look at someone who never seems shaken, remember, they're not disconnected from life. They're deeply connected to it. They're not avoiding emotion. They've mastered it. They're not passive. They're wise. They've stopped being pushed around by every wave because they've learned to stand firm within themselves. Their calmness isn't emptiness. It's understanding. They save their energy for what matters, not for every situation that demands a reaction. They've seen how emotional chaos destroys relationships, drains mental health, and steals time. So now, when someone tries to provoke them, they pause instead of break. Their calm is not silence, it's strength. When someone misreads their intentions, they decide whether it's worth clarifying or whether it's wiser to simply step back. When life starts weighing on their shoulders, they don't crumble. They lean on trust, patience, and perspective. That's what makes people with this kind of stillness so captivating. It isn't that they carry all the solutions. It's that they finally stopped chasing certainty. They've accepted that not everything needs to be figured out right now. And in a world desperate to control every outcome, their acceptance becomes its own quiet form of strength. Because while many people are fighting invisible battles, replaying old scenes, overthinking tiny moments, drowning in their own analysis, calm individuals know that silence can communicate more powerfully than any argument. They understand that not every feeling requires an audience. And sometimes the greatest act of power is simply choosing not to react. But there's another layer to their psychology that people rarely acknowledge. A lot of calmness grows out of self-protection. It can be a coping strategy, subtle but effective. For many, calm wasn't something they intentionally chose. It was something they built out of necessity. They learned young that loud reactions changed nothing, that being composed kept them safer, that guarding their emotions prevented deeper wounds. So tranquility became their armor, and quiet became the safest place to exist. But here's the beautiful part. What began as defense eventually turned into wisdom. That early emotional distance transformed into self-knowledge. That instinct to stay quiet grew into stability. And over time, this protective calmness turned into genuine inner peace. That's why calm people often have such sharp self-awareness. They know their triggers. They recognize their emotional cycles. They don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. Stillness doesn't scare them because stillness feels like home. It's clarity disguised as quiet. It's the sound of a person who has stopped running from themselves. People like this have a way of slowing the atmosphere around them. They make a room feel softer without saying a word. They never demand the spotlight. They don't match other people's chaos. Instead, they lower the intensity of the entire space simply by existing. You can feel it in their presence, a grounding calm that doesn't need to be announced. There's something incredibly magnetic about people who can stay composed in a world addicted to overreaction. Their lack of noise isn't lack of feeling. Their emotions have simply grown up. And emotional maturity has nothing to do with age. It's about understanding what is truly worthy of your energy. Calm people learn this through experience. They understand that arguing rarely transforms anyone's opinion. That moving in a hurry rarely makes anything happen faster. That worrying ahead of time rarely prevents the future. So they release what drains them, not because they're detached, but because they've learned how expensive it is to care about everything. Chances are, the calm person you know has already survived the very thing you're spiraling about. They've walked through heartbreak, loss, rejection, fear. They've learned that life keeps going even when it feels unbearable. That realization becomes the root of their peace. They don't expect life to be smooth. They've simply stopped expecting it to be just. And that shift alone removes half the struggle. When something painful happens, most people slip into "why me?" But the calm person thinks, "Why not me?" Not from hopelessness, but from understanding that hardship touches everyone. Fighting that truth only invites more pain. They've discovered something deeply woven into human psychology. Pain without resistance is just sensation. But pain resisted becomes suffering. So they stopped resisting reality. They choose to flow with life, not as passive bystanders, but as people who know when to move forward and when to wait. Calmness is not passivity. It is the highest form of control, the control of oneself. They've learned to keep the world outside and their inner space sacred. The world may be unpredictable, loud, even cruel, but their inner world remains protected. They refuse to allow outside chaos to dictate their internal state. That's why calm people often feel like they exist in another dimension. In a way, they do. They live in the space between what happens and how they respond. That tiny, nearly invisible pause is what defines them. It's the heart of emotional intelligence. Because calmness isn't something you stumble upon, it's something you create. Every tranquil person you meet has been building that calm brick by brick. In long nights when their thoughts wouldn't quiet down. In mornings when they wanted to give up. In conflicts where they chose breath over reaction. It's intentional, not accidental. They didn't become unshakable because life grew easier. They became unshakable because they stopped failing the same emotional lessons. If you asked a calm person what changed them, they'd probably say something simple like, "I just got tired. Tired of thinking too much. Tired of defending themselves. Tired of being misread. Tired of pouring energy into every small thing." They started cherishing peace like oxygen. And once they felt it, they refused to lose it again. It's strange how society applauds loud achievements, but overlooks quiet resilience. Yet it's the calm ones who often carry the deepest wisdom. They're the people who can sit in stillness long enough to truly listen, to themselves and to life. They see more than they express. Their silence sharpens their intuition. In that silence, they observe without jumping to conclusions. And that's what allows them to understand others with such clarity. Calm people are emotional interpreters. They don't just hear words, they hear underlying intentions. They don't just see actions, they perceive the emotional wounds behind them. They don't just react to energy, they absorb it, decode it, and release it without letting it cling to them. That's why talking to a calm person feels healing. You feel understood instead of judged, seen instead of dismissed. They're not listening to argue. They're listening to understand. And that kind of listening requires inner stillness. Stillness, by the way, takes strength. It's difficult to remain soft when life keeps giving you reasons to harden. But calm people choose softness anyway, not because softness is easy, but because it keeps them human. They've realized that peace isn't the absence of trouble. Peace is the ability to face trouble without losing yourself. That's the difference. Most people try to find peace in perfect circumstances. Calm people create peace in imperfect ones. They don't wait for storms to disappear. They learn how to stay grounded within them. You'll notice they often have simple rituals. A short walk, a quiet moment in the morning, a warm drink at night, a few minutes of reflection before sleep. These aren't random habits. They're anchors. Repetition builds psychological safety, and calm people guard it fiercely because it keeps the mind steady. They know that without small pockets of stillness, the mind begins creating stories. And the quieter the mind, the clearer those stories become. Here's the beautiful paradox. Calm people tend to feel emotions intensely, yet they react the least. Not because they're numb, but because they've learned that expression doesn't require explosion. Sometimes you honor an emotion by holding it gently until it fades. This doesn't mean their emotional world is weak. Their sadness becomes insight. Their anger becomes direction. Their fear becomes faith. That transformation, that emotional alchemy, is the essence of calmness. It is what separates emotional chaos from emotional maturity. Calmness doesn't just shift your inner world. It reshapes the way others respond to you. When you remain steady, you become harder to provoke. People who thrive on emotional reactions suddenly lose their influence because they can't predict your next move. That alone protects your energy. Because nothing unsettles chaos more than someone who refuses to participate in it. It's a silent act of resistance. While everyone else rushes to fire back, the calm person pauses, And in that pause, they see what others overlook. They pick up on intentions, patterns, and hidden dynamics that only reveal themselves in stillness. They don't jump to conclusions because they've learned that the truth eventually shows itself. It doesn't need to be dragged out. That's why calm people rarely regret their decisions. They give moments the space they need to unfold. And maybe that's where their real wisdom lies. They don't just control emotion, they honor timing. They know that time exposes what emotion disguises, and patience isn't laziness. It's understanding wearing the mask of waiting. So, while others chase quick answers, calm people let things settle. They know that forcing clarity is the fastest path to confusion. If you ask a calm person how they manage to stay so composed, they usually give a simple answer like, "I stopped fighting everything." But what they truly mean is they stopped resisting life. They stopped trying to win every debate, manage every twist, rewrite every memory, or predict every outcome. They started trusting their ability to handle whatever arrives. That's the quiet ingredient behind calmness. Trust. Not in a perfect future, but in themselves. This trust isn't arrogance. It's the residue of survival. It's the confidence born from enduring storms and learning that they always make it through. That's why calm people carry a subtle, steady assurance. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the type that feels like solid ground. You just feel more secure around them. Their presence says, "We don't need to hurry. We don't need to fight. We're safe right here." And maybe the world needs more people like that. People who bring peace instead of noise, who respond thoughtfully instead of impulsively, who listen with care instead of jumping to judgment. Imagine if everyone practiced that for just a single day. The world would feel softer. And in that quiet, we might uncover more healing than words could ever offer. But let's be honest, remaining calm isn't effortless. Even the calmest souls lose their center at times. They get angry, break down, doubt themselves. The difference is they know how to return to equilibrium. They don't drown in emotions. They let them flow. They watch, they feel, they understand, and then they release. That's the rhythm. Awareness, acceptance, letting go. True calmness isn't about never trembling. It's about always finding your way back to steady ground. Calm people see emotions as waves. They rise, they crest, they fall. You can't stop waves from coming, but you can learn how to move with them. They don't let one emotional moment convince them that the entire ocean is unsafe. They've learned that joy and pain are temporary visitors, both meaningful, both passing. And in accepting their temporary nature, they find peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. That's why calm people often feel timeless, as though they've stepped outside the frantic pace of everyone else. In a sense, they have. They're no longer chasing peace. They've allowed themselves to embody it. And maybe you've started feeling that pull too, that longing for stillness, that desire for peace over excitement. Maybe chaos no longer entertains you. Maybe silence feels healthier. Maybe you choose understanding instead of conflict. That doesn't mean you're becoming weak. It means you're evolving. Calmness isn't an inherited trait. It's a path you grow into. And when you do, the world starts to look different. You begin valuing gentle voices, slow mornings, uncluttered thoughts. You measure success not by noise or pace, but by how lightly your heart feels. And here's the beautiful thing. The more calm you cultivate, the clearer everything becomes. You start seeing people as they really are. You recognize patterns that were once invisible. You notice which moments matter and which are just distractions, wearing importance as a costume. And once this clarity arrives, it becomes impossible to ignore. So you simplify. You clear your mental space. You release connections that weigh you down. You choose fewer things, yet everything feels richer. Because calm people understand something most people don't. The goal isn't a flawless life. It's a quiet mind. Peace doesn't come from straightening everything outside of you. It comes from finding stability within, even when everything around you feels unpredictable. That's what makes calm people rare. Not because they feel less, but because they understand more. They don't escape the storm. They become the steady center inside it. They don't try to overpower the wind. They learn to move with its rhythm. They don't fear uncertainty. They embrace it as part of being alive. And maybe that's the lesson we all need to hear. Calmness isn't something waiting at the finish line. It's something you discover when you stop sprinting through life and finally choose presence. Life will always shake you. It will challenge your patience, press your limits, and disrupt your plans. But every time it does, you have a choice. React blindly or return intentionally. And every time you choose to return to calm, you grow a little stronger, a little wiser, a little freer. So if anyone has ever told you that you're too calm, let that be your compliment. It means you've learned the rare art of staying balanced in a world that thrives on instability. It means you can witness the storm without becoming part of it. It means your strength doesn't shout. It stands quietly, unshaken. Because calmness isn't emptiness. It's fullness without chaos. It's strength without noise. It's emotion carried with grace.